Hi, in my last video I said that I wanted to talk in my next video, this one, about the government's guidance to employers, which had been under consultation, and the deadline for that consultation was last Tuesday evening. Now, so far there's been nothing really forthcoming from that. But as we know, the government, in the form of Boris Johnson, yesterday gave an address to the nation on returning to work, and it promised a roadmap. Now, we've been waiting for an exit strategy from the government on coronavirus situation, and it's not really been forthcoming. And I think that without politicising this in any way, it's fairly clear that yesterday's roadmap, if it could be called such a thing, was a little bit M60 or M25, depending on whether you're familiar with the Manchester or the London circulars. It didn't really help us in any way. Go back to work, stay at home. So I want to give some advice, and remember these videos are directed at the smaller employers. And so I'm going to advise as if I was advising you in a large organisation. And I'm going to start by saying that the watchwords, the golden thread through all of this, has to be health, safety and well-being. We now have to face the prospect of many people working from home for some time to come. And in fact, this may be embedded in our working culture much more than it was prior to the beginning of this year. Now, that's not entirely a bad thing, but let's go back to those words: health, safety and well-being. At first, this was seen as being something that was likely to be temporary. The chances are we're looking at it being much longer, and in many cases, perhaps permanent. And you have to consider a number of things, and I've said several times in these videos that you have to look at a risk assessment of the place of work. The new place of work may be a little office at home, it may be the kitchen table, it may be anything, but you need to assess that, you need to risk assess that in terms of the ergonomics and within the situation that they're working under. Is the seating fine? Do you need to provide new seating for them? Because if they were in your office, if those people were working from your offices, you would provide them with adequate seating, you would provide them with a decent desk. So now we've got to start looking at these kinds of things a little more seriously. The psychological aspect of working from home, again, we've touched on before, and it can be really difficult. And I think that it's really, really important that employers now start thinking much more seriously about that psychological well-being of people working at home, communication systems being put in place. Now, there's something that has run as a thread through other people's thinking on this working from home and furloughing of employees, which kind of indicates a lack of trust in how much they will do, whether or not people are going to be skiving off work. Now, it's my experience of a long history of working in employee relations and human resource management, that the vast majority of people do not go into work in order to do a bad job. They do not go into work in order to skive. Of course, there are people that do so, and we've talked before about disciplinary procedures and so on to deal with that, and performance procedures. And it is important that when people are working from home that you do bring in performance mechanisms, but the assumption of laziness is very much a misconception. In fact, in the past, I have actually had to warn people that I've managed not to work too much when they work from home. Once, there's a person that was managed by me, and he was sending me emails at 11 o'clock at night and beyond. And I had to tell him, stop doing this. We have a duty of care. The company has a duty of care towards you, and you cannot be working these kinds of hours. If you can't do all the work that you need to do during the day, during the hours specified, then we'll sort out how to redistribute or reorganize that work. But we cannot have it that people are working all those hours. So there's an importance there that must be adhered to. Now let's talk about the rather vague instructions about whether people should start returning to work in a workplace. Now, first of all, getting to and from work, using public transport. How are people going to do this? How are people going to, in Manchester where I live, on the outskirts of Manchester where I live, how can it be that people get into work if they're working in the city, in the town, when they live some miles away from that? How many bikes are going to be purchased for people to travel to work? And where are they going to put them when they get there? There's been no logistical think through on this. How are people going to get to work on a public transport system that is running at limited capacity? And how are they going to stay safe doing that? It is not going to be possible. And when you're thinking, if you already have your workplaces open, you must already be thinking about health and safety at work. The distancing that people have, so that you set up a system where people are unable to work close together. Little things like offering someone a coffee as you go and brew one for yourself. All these things have to be taken into consideration. So proximity of people working together in their work units. These kinds of things are really important, but so is PPE. At present, the Health and Safety Executive is considering investigating even the public bodies in health and care industries where people have been dying as a result of contracting the virus in their work environment. Now, of course, people in the health and care industries are going to be more exposed than most. But the health and care providers are not exempt from the rest of legislation. They're not exempt from the Health and Safety at Work Act, and nor are you. And you must consider as a priority health and safety at work. You must consider this because when the Health and Safety Executive is looking at investigating, they are also considering criminal investigations where their conclusions may be corporate manslaughter. Now, I don't want to be scaremongering about this, but it really is of paramount importance that employers, should we be bringing people back into a workplace, that we look at all sorts of different ways of working, like staggering shifts so that not everyone is in at the same time, like half-time working, part-time working, like making it that people are not starting or finishing at the same time so that there is no overburden on public transport, and that the roads are not congested with people at a particular time in the morning, and that through those congestions the accidents take place on things like motorways and air roads. Because in the not too distant past, driving to work for me, driving to different places of work for me over the past few years, I've virtually never worked anywhere where I've not had to travel down a motorway to get there. And the frequency of accidents, which means the ambulances, which means police, which means people attending and those people being taken to hospital because of the volume of traffic on the roads. So we've got to be really conscious of all of these things. Okay. I also want to mention the issue of other legislation that impacts upon us, and that is the equality legislation. And I don't think that any one of the employers that I want to be talking to who I believe to be ethical and principled employers, want to be in contravention of the Equality Act in any way, shape or form. So when we're looking at all the other aspects of coronavirus and the measures that we take as employers to deal with that effectively, we have to also consider our obligations under the Equality Act, including things like providing reasonable adjustments for people who are disabled, including our selection procedures for things like furlough leave and things like redundancy, which I discussed in the last video and we may be having to consider. Look at objective criteria for each of those things. Let's make sure that we stay as safe as we possibly can. Let's make sure that our obligations under health, safety, well-being and equality conditions are met. We must produce a safe environment for people to work in. Thank you for watching. Bye.